Greetings in the precious name of Jesus Christ. We greet you once again in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. On behalf of our presiding prelate, Bishop Gregory Hargrave, and the entire administrative staff of the United Holy Church of America, we're happy that you can attend once again unto our theological third Thursday. And we're blessed tonight to have our Christmas edition going on. I am Dr. Gail Gilmore. I am the Christian Education Director. Our elder, Dr. Gloria Aguga, she is the chair lady for the Education Department. And the whole entire education department is happy to have you here with us once again. And tonight we are going to have a discussion which promises to be very, very thought-provoking, discussing Hanukkah and Christmas and understanding the difference. And we are blessed tonight that we have a distinguished guest, our Dr. Robert Wafawanaka. He is an associate professor of biblical studies and the Old Testament slash Hebrew Bible at the Samuel DeWitt School, Proctor School of Theology from Virginia Union University. Dr. Wafawanaka, he holds a master's in theology and an additional master's of studies in theology from Harvard Divinity School. He also has a doctorate in theology from Boston University School of Theology. He also is an author of Am I Still My Brother's Keeper? He's going to tell you a lot more about that as we end. And the book is basically about the biblical perspectives on poverty. And we are honored to have him here with us tonight. And we say good evening to everyone. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wafawanaka.
Thank you, Dr. Gilmore, for the wonderful introduction, and thank you to Dr. Agoga for the invitation. Greetings to Bishop Hargrave and members of the United Holy Church and everyone who is listening tonight. Thank you for this opportunity to gather and think about a couple of important holidays, Hanukkah from the Jewish perspective and Christmas for us Christians. So we're going to be talking about the difference between Hanukkah and Christmas. All right, I want to begin with an image of the menorah in the Hanukkah tradition. The symbol that you see symbolizes the menorah. And as I go through the presentation, you will see that this is significant because it has 8 lights that symbolize the days in which the oil burned when Judas Maccabeus was able to rededicate the temple. So in the Jewish tradition, these lights are lit every day of Hanukkah. Right now, we are in the season of Hanukkah in the Jewish tradition that ends shortly before Christmas. And then for us Christians, we'll celebrate next week, Christmas on December 25th. So in the Jewish tradition, Hanukkah is already in progress beginning sundown on Sunday. So each night a candle is lit. You may see in the middle, you have the tallest candle. That is the shamash candle that is used to light all the other candles. In other words, is the helping candle that is used to light each candle day by day until all the lights or the candles are lit by the 8th day. And again, this symbolizes the miracle of Hanukkah, the miracle of oil that we will talk about. All right. So I want to begin with some of the purposes for our presentation that I want to discuss the historical context and the cultural roots of Hanukkah, and also the meaning of Hanukkah and the meaning of Christmas. The theme of light pervades both Hanukkah and Christmas. and also how they inspire light, love, and also celebration in the midst of danger. Hanukkah and Christmas also enable us to engage in dialogue, in the religious dialogue. I believe that when we understand each other as Jews, as Christians, we are better able to understand one another. So as we go through these traditions, hopefully that will foster some conversation, understanding, and respect. Now, these are traditions that Jews and Christians have been celebrating for a long time, such that they've evolved, developed over time. And we also have modern influences that we'll talk about later, whether it refers to Hanukkah or to Christmas. And also we have contemporary observances of Hanukkah and Christmas, and some of the things that take place today, especially when people forget the meaning of Christmas. All right, I want to begin with the context of Hanukkah. That if you look at the Hebrew Bible, if you read the Hebrew Bible, the history of the Hebrew Bible, or what we Christians call the Old Testament, you will see that this is the history of a people that is always under some imperial domination. All you have to do is to take a look at the map of the biblical world. In some of your Bibles, you have a map at the back of the Bible. And if you consult it, you will see the biblical world, the area that is called the Fertile Crescent. That's an area that was heavily contested by many empires. So as you go through the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, you read about the different nations that controlled Israel. For example, you have the Egyptian Empire for a while, then the Assyrian Empire. Once Israel is on the land, you have the Assyrian Empire ruling the entire area. And again, as you read that history, you know that the Assyrian Empire destroys the northern kingdom in 722 BC. These empires come in succession. After the Assyrian Empire, you have the Babylonian Empire that takes control of the whole entire area. And they also engage in a policy similar to the Assyrians, who deport people from their land. So by the time you get to the end of Second Kings, Jerusalem is destroyed, the temple is destroyed and burned, and the people have been exiled to Babylon. So that's another effect of Israel and Judah living under imperial occupation. So they are away from their land, they are in exile for a while until a new empire comes upon the scene. And this time is the Persian Empire in the 6th century, where again you have a new power on the horizon. But the Persians are different. They engage in a very different policy from the Assyrians and the Babylonians. As a matter of fact, they actually allow the Jews to go back to their homeland. They fund the return program, the rebuilding programs. So if you read the narratives of Ezra and Nehemiah and the books of Chronicles, you will see the people coming back under Persian authorization. So the policy is reversed and they come back to their land. But again, no empire lasts forever. The Persian Empire was good. In fact, when you read Isaiah, Isaiah describes Cyrus as a Messiah, an anointed figure. He's the only foreign king that is given that designation. But it was precisely because of what he did to allow the people to go back to their homeland. But after that empire, you know, there is another empire on the horizon, the Greek Empire comes along, and then you, of course, you read about Alexander the Great and all the things that he was able to do and all the nations that he conquered. So you have Alexander the Great, but of course, you know, he doesn't rule forever. At some point he dies, and when he dies, his empire is divided among his commanders. And you have the 4 generals that we know from history, the Seleucids, then the Ptolemies ruling in Egypt, Antigonus and Lysimachus. But pretty much we know about the Seleucids ruling from Antioch in Syria, and the Ptolemies ruling from Egypt. These are the ones that had the most effect on the Jewish people. And then after that, you have the Roman Empire. So by the time we get to the Roman Empire, we are already in the first century, in New Testament times, dealing with the emergence of Christianity. But back to the Greek period, the Hellenistic period. So Alexander the Great dies, and then his empire is divided among his generals. And then out of the Syrian group, the Seleucid dynasty, comes Antiochus Epiphanes, the fourth, who imposed Hellenist customs on the Jews, desecrated the temple, banned Jewish ritual. We might not be familiar with this history because this material is covered not necessarily in our canonical Bibles. Rather, this is in the Apocrypha, the books of Maccabees, first and second Maccabees, and there are other books of the Maccabees. So if you don't read those books, you might not know, but basically I would encourage you to read, especially the first Maccabees, where you read about this history. And as you read that history, you will find that Antiochus Epiphanes was an oppressive king. This is also the same king that you remember from the book of Daniel, because the book of Daniel is also written in the same context in the 2nd century, in chapter 7, with the reference to the fourth beast with 10 horns, and then the 11th horns that speaks with a mouth that speaks arrogantly, that refers to Antiochus Epiphanes. But basically, so if you read Daniel and also the book of the first Maccabees, the first chapter, you find that Antiochus Epiphanes engaged in things that were so unexpected, so oppressive, to the point that the Jews end up taking arms to fight for their freedom. So you have him forbidding worship, the Sabbath, which is very important in Jewish culture, defiling the sanctuary or the holy ones, building altars to other gods, and then most importantly, sacrificing pigs and unclean animals on the altar. Now, in Jewish culture, that is anathema. You don't do that. And then, of course, banning things like circumcision, which is an important Jewish ritual. Again, as you read First Maccabees, you hear the king writing letter and say, well, whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. So these things become so oppressive that as you read that chapter, it's a very long chapter. You have the story of Mattathias, the priest of Modin, who is so offended that he kills 2 people right at the altar because of what they are doing, the sacrilegious that they are engaging in. And then he rallies his people, his 5 sons come around him, and they basically flee to the mountains, to the hills, to fight a liberation struggle against the Assyrian oppressors. So again, if you read that history, it's a 25-year struggle that they engage in. And at the end of that half-quarter century struggle, Judas Maccabeus and his brothers win that battle and are able to cleanse the temple, destroy the altar that had been defiled, and build a new altar. And then they began to celebrate that day. So so that took place on the month of Kislev, which is November, December in Jewish on the Jewish calendar. And Second Maccabees also reflects the same story, the success of the Maccabees, the Maccabean brothers. If you read Second Maccabees chapter 10, the first 8 verses, the text will say, well, it happened that on the same day that the altar had been defiled, they cleansed it, and then they celebrated it for 8 days. And then Judas declared that they should mark this day and remember it every day. So to this day, the Jews celebrate Hanukkah, to the fact that the Maccabees were able to cleanse the temple. And then there was only a little bit of oil that they found and lit the candle, and that oil was supposed to last just for one day. But the miracle of Hanukkah is that it lasted 8 days. So in the midst of oppression, we see a God that protects, a God that provides. And that is why to this day, the Jews celebrate that occasion with lighting the light of Hanukkah for 8 days. And then they put it on the window so that it can be visible, so that it can be seen. So that is the context of Hanukkah, the occupation of Antiochus Epiphanes. So Hanukkah arises out of this context of oppression in which the
Okay.
Jews
So
in.
it was a celebration, basically, of God bringing them out
Yes.
from the oppression.
Yes. So yeah, definitely God bring them out of oppression and winning their battle, and then the God providing that light, that guidance. In some ways, the image of light tells us that light can dispel darkness. When you get the New Testament, Jesus is the light of the world, and that light can shine in the midst of darkness. So Hanukkah is the story of darkness, but the light
Mm.
dispels that darkness. Now, when we for the context of the New Testament, so you move from the Hellenistic period to the Roman time, when now the Romans come to Jerusalem, 63 BCE. Pompey comes to Jerusalem because what the Maccabees did, so they secured independence, and that independence lasted for about a century, from 142 to 37. So after the Maccabean revolt, you see a long line of Hasmonean rulers for a century. So in the midst of imperial occupation, the Jewish population, they are free maybe a couple of times. The time of David and Solomon, and the Golden Age, and then the time of after the Maccabean revolt for about a century. So leading so when the Romans come into power, they also become very oppressive. They collect taxes. There's cultural tension, and this is the environment in which Jesus is born. But again, if you read the history from that time period, especially the writings of Flavius Josephus, who was a Jewish historian around the time of Jesus. He was quite prolific. He wrote quite a lot about Jewish history, culture, and one of his books is The Jewish War, in which he chronicles the war between the Jews and the Romans. That war was fought from 66 to 70. So if you think of how all these empires I talked about, the Hellenists are very oppressive, that the Jews take up arms to fight for their freedom. Then later on, the Romans are also very oppressive, to the point that the Jews take up arms and fight against the Romans. But in this case, they do not win. It ends disastrously with the Romans winning the battle in the final standout at Masada. But
So, what challenges and opportunities do you see when people celebrate both holidays? What are some of the challenges?
I think in terms of challenges, is the challenge that sometimes we are faced with difficult situations, impossible situations, and we may draw inspiration from some of these stories. The persistence of the Maccabees in terms of their quest for freedom. And when you also get to the time of Jesus, we also find that Jesus is born at a time that is very difficult, because the Romans are in control of Palestine. When you get to the New Testament, you find that Herod hears that a king of the Jews has been born, right? And what does he say? Well, go find out where the king is. And I also want to worship him, but basically he wants to eliminate any ruler. So again, if you look at read the writings of Josephus, Herod was a crazy king. He was a megalomaniac. He was a power-hungry king. He would eliminate anybody that threatened him, from his wives or his sons. So the fact that Jesus is born as the king of the Jews, that was a threat to him. That's why you find him acting the way he did.
Yes, and he
So there
wanted
are threats,
the male babies,
right?
murdered,
Right,
basically. So that
exactly.
was another form of oppression to the
Exactly.
people.
But the hopes, the opportunities that are in the midst of all these threats, there's also these are stories of triumph that the
Yes,
Maccabees are able to triumph and celebrate their victory to this very day. As Christianity is grows out of this Roman-controlled Palestine, but centuries later, we are still talking about the story of Jesus and still
right. And
celebrating.
so there's victory in both how God brought them out
Yes, ma'am. There's victory. Yeah,
triumphantly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So as we continue so that Maccabean revolt that I talked about again, we see the resistance by the Jews. You may read First Maccabees chapter 10, that Mattathias, reacts to Antiochus Epiphanes, and basically rallies his people. And again, if you read that book, you find him roll calling all the heroes of old that inspired, like Phineas, that inspired the people of Israel to triumph against their enemies, against all kinds of odds. So he goes through that roll call in order to inspire his sons that they should continue the struggle. So we may be going through things, through trauma and other things, but these stories tell us to continue to struggle. Then again, that is so that their struggle, as I said, was a quarter century struggle, which was rewarded with the victory that Judas was able to achieve. And then after that victory, the Jews are free under Asmonean rulers for a century until Pompey comes to Jerusalem in 63. So the rededication of the temple means that Jerusalem is now rebuilt as a religious center. In fact, in biblical history, Hebrew history, Jerusalem is the city of God, the city of David, the city that David founded, and it is also the presence of God, because the Ark of the Covenant was kept in Jerusalem. So the idea that the Seleucids desecrated the temple, defiled the temple, that is a big issue, especially if you are a faithful, believing Jew. So that's why you see the Maccabees engaging in this struggle, so that they can rescue the temple and then rededicate it and cleanse it. So again, they celebrated the dedication of the altar, and they were joyful about it. They offered burnt offerings, and they offered a sacrifice of well-being and thanksgiving offering. These offerings were always taking place in Jewish culture, in the harvest festivals. So they are continuing with the traditions that they've always been making. So Hanukkah commemorates the military victory and the miracle of oil burning for 8 days. Again, so the supply is limited. That oil was supposed to last for just one day, but it lasted 8 days. So it is the miracle of light, which shows that God can provide, faith can endure, hope continues. In some ways, it reminds me of a familiar story, the story of one of the stories about Jesus, where Jesus is able to feed 5,000 people, right? With 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Yeah.
All right.
God
Yes.
provides, God can provide. So again, we find similarities and connections among those stories. So that's why this story is continuing. So the light continues to shine. Those lights that the Jews light every day during Hanukkah, they are burning up now to show that light can dispel evil. You can have any kind of evil or darkness of any kind, but if you strike light into it, light, love, it can dispel all kinds of evil. In some ways, we might even get lessons for ourselves that we may live in a dark world, but if we show the light of love, that may dispel some of the darkness around us. So my encouragement for you is to, read those books and get an idea of, Hanukkah in terms of its background. Then we have for the New Testament, well, the sort of Christianity, Christmas, as we know, we celebrate it every December 25th for various reasons. We have really two stories as you read the gospel narratives. We have the story in Matthew and also in Luke's gospel, which describes Matthew describes the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem, and then the visit of the Magi, the wise men or the astrologers who give Jesus the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And then, of course, when Herod hears that a king of the Jews has been born, he tells them, well, find out where he has been born so that I too may come and worship him. But again, because of divine guidance, Joseph is told by the angel that Herod plans to kill the baby and he should go to Egypt until he tells him when to come back. And we know the story tells us that Joseph is able to go to escape to Egypt and then come back after Herod dies. So we have a story of humble origins, especially when you look at another version of the story. So the story of Jesus come. One of the things that we should also learn is that the Christmas story comes to us in different versions. These are stories that were written not necessarily as they were taking place. Much of the Bible is written after things take place. The disciples wrote from memory. So sometimes that's why you find differences when we tell stories, that you can do that experiment and tell a story, tell somebody, 10 people, and let it come back to you, right? That story might be different from the way you told it. So the same thing with these stories that we read about, that we have different versions, different perspectives. So on one account, we have Matthew, who is telling the story of the birth of Jesus from his perspective as a Jew, showing that the birth of Jesus is continuous with Judaism. In other words, Jesus is a son of Abraham, a son of David, and then it talks about those 3 generations of 14, which connects nicely. And then you have another version from Luke, who tells a slightly different story. As a matter of fact, you don't have any birth story from Mark, right? If you think of this, not a gospel. Mark simply begins with Jesus preaching. But Luke tells us another story of humble beginnings, the announcement, the announcement. And then Joseph going to Bethlehem for a census that Augustus Caesar had declared during the reign of Quirinius, the governor of Syria. And then, of course, said that when the couple got to Jerusalem, they found no room in the inn, right? So they're reduced to a manger. They go in the manger, and then Jesus is born in a manger. And of course, Luke also tells us that the shepherds go to worship Jesus, and then tell them what the angel had said. So if you think of the first persons to acknowledge, welcome, and worship Jesus, the lowliest people, some of the lowest people in society, like the shepherds minding their flock in the field, and they are given access to this idea of incarnation, that God comes in human form in the birth of Jesus, and the ones to receive him are people we might consider as beneath us, as lowly. So this is a very powerful story that Luke tells, the story of humble beginnings. The angel also tells that, well, this is a sort of good news for all people, where again God is identified as the God that is a God of the lowly people. So Jesus comes, Jesus is born to us to give us good news to the entire world. And again, from Matthew's account, we say, well, King Herod also, wanted to worship Jesus. But again, Herod represents a threat. because he was threatened. He wanted to get rid of Jesus. But again, in the midst of the apparent threat that Jesus is exposed to, there's always divine intervention where Joseph is able to go to Egypt with Mary until Herod dies. So in both the Hanukkah story and the Christmas story, according to Matthew's gospel, we find danger lurking around every corner. But then the hand of God appearing to provide that security. So again, as I mentioned, so we need to read these stories for what they are, what Matthew says, what Luke says. But again, the theme continues to persist. So the central theme of Christmas is that God becomes human. God brings salvation. This is part of the core of the theological message. And then when we think of these traditions today, we may engage in gift giving because, again, Jesus receives gifts. Sometimes we may think of just the gifts instead of the purpose or the reason. We also incorporate traditions like decorating trees, serving festive meals, reflecting on the religious values of these stories. So in as much as we celebrate, we ought to remember the reason for this season. So Jesus becomes the light that shines in the darkness, and then John says, darkness, he has not overtaken it. So the Christmas story that we celebrate next week is on December 25th. However, scholars argue that, well, we don't really know when Jesus was born. Although there are some disputes about when exactly Jesus was born, but the importance of Jesus cannot be overlooked. The message of the gospel cannot be overlooked. So you have evidence from the gospels indicating that Jesus was born sometime between 6 and 4 BC, because Matthew says that it was at the end of Herod. When Herod heard that a king of the Jews had been born, then he sent his messengers to kill all the boys. If you look at the picture, these were little boys or babies that were 2 years and under. In other words, suggesting that Jesus would have been born within that time frame. So if Herod died about 4 BC, so that tells us that, well, probably Jesus was born somewhere between 7 and 6 BC, which would fit within that time period that Herod was looking for those babies. And then another issue is that, well, how do we come up with, March, with December 25th as the date of Christmas? Well, there's some church historians who have different ideas. And also research shows that, well, that date was determined sometime in the 3rd or 5th century, 3rd or 4th century. And some point to Julius Africanus, who was able to do some calculation and say, well, the Annunciation to Mary was made, say, earlier, say, March 25th, 9 months before the birth of Jesus. So again, if you count from March 25th, you end up with December 25th as the exact 9 months. You also have other scholars saying, well, Christianity, in as much as it is a religious holiday, there's some kind of pagan context. For example, the linking Christmas to the end of the winter solstice in the Roman festival of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, or the rebirth of the sun. In other words, the winter days are ending and the sun comes up, showing that the sun cannot be conquered. But for Christians, Jesus is born around that same time, and Jesus becomes the true light of the world. He becomes the Son of God, S-O-N, rather than the S-U-N. But in any case, Jesus is the light of the world. So both Matthew and Luke declare that Jesus is born out of unusual circumstances. But there's still good news out of these unusual circumstances. There's also a central theological belief to Christians that God incarnates in human beings. So the incarnation that Jesus becomes, God becomes real in the birth of Jesus. Uh, that is a gift to us. God gives the best, His only Son for us. So, in as much as we give gifts next week, we're buying this and that, giving gifts to people. Can you give the best? Can you give? God gave the best. How much of the best can you give? God gave His only Son. So we are beginning. We're in the season of Advent. We are getting. We're celebrating Christmas. So some researchers say that the Christmas story tells us about the fulfillment of God's purposes. That in spite of the attempt to eliminate the Messiah, God's purposes continue to be fulfilled. Even when you look at Jewish history, you still find the promises of God that are given way back in Genesis, in the book of Genesis, continue to unfold in the life of the history of Israel, the people of God. And in the midst of empire after empire after empire, you find Israel and Judah surviving. They may go into exile, they may be displaced, their temple may be destroyed, but they come back and they rebuild and they continue to worship. So
And
again,
yeah, it seems like it's ongoing. They go into captivity.
yes,
God brings them out. Then they build. And I was going to ask you, do you feel that both of these holidays, Hanukkah and Christmas, that it reveals a different understanding of God's presence and intervention in human history? Or do you feel like both of them shows God's presence and his intervention in human history?
yeah, I think the stories are different, the contexts are different, but God is present. God intervenes. Even if you look in the Hebrew Bible, you find prophets like Jeremiah weeping and say, why do the ways of the wicked prosper? Why are we suffering? Job and Jeremiah, they even cursed the days of their birth. At some point, it seems like God is absent, but God always shows up. Even there are some books like the Book of Esther where you don't find any reference to God, but scholars will say, well, God was working behind the scenes to save God's people. So, in as much as the Book of Esther will describe the near destruction of God's people because of the lot that Haman had put on the Jewish people. God still saves them, without even God's name being mentioned. The people are still saved. So I think I believe that I see some connection between these two stories: the Christmas story and also the story of Hanukkah. So in the stories by Matthew and Luke, the birth of Jesus is heralded by the lowest individuals in society. Again, that also tells that sometimes, we build walls among ourselves that divide us, but these walls come tumbling down with the birth of Jesus. The walls break down. In other words, the Christmas story tells us that the walls we put around us, this bridge, we need to make bridges rather than build walls, because Jesus comes for the good news is for all people. That the menorah, so in terms of the rituals that are conducted, we have the menorah that I talked about, that in Jewish culture, they light the menorah each night of the Hanukkah to celebrate the miracle of oil. So they light a candle each night until all the 8 candles are lit on the 8th day. The light in the center, the Shamash light, is used as a helping light, the one that lights others, the idea of helping others. It is light, but then that light is given to assist others. And again, to commemorate what Judas and the Maccabees did, you celebrate with light, but you also they eat foods that are baked in oil. The latkes, those potato pancakes that are baked in oil, uh, the donuts that are sweets, basically to show that the element of provision is in all these foods that symbolize life, continuity, and provision. They also play games like dreidel, and also they give gifts to children, and then they engage in other family traditions. In other words, Hanukkah is a moment that brings families together to celebrate. Christmas also is a tradition that brings families together. We give gifts, but we ought not to forget the meaning of Christmas. So we have Hanukkah highlighting themes of religious freedom, that the Maccabees secure freedom, they persevere for a century, they are free in their own land. They give gratitude to God through those festivals that they always do. And then again, it strengthens Jewish identity, Jewish ritual. So all people,
Okay. Dr.
yes.
Wafawanaka, one of our audience listeners posed this question they wanted me to ask you was, do the 8 days represent something different every day?
Do they represent something different every day? Um, Well, yeah, they do represent something different every day, but it's tied to the celebration of the victory that is given. Light, success, family, provision. In fact, let me share the next slide, and you will see the things, the blessings that are given. So when they light the light, they give blessings. So the blessings of the Hanukkah candle, for example, the first one says, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to kindle the Hanukkah light." And basically, this is a commandment that was given by Judas, that they should always light that light. They should always remember that event, that God is king, because God was able to secure the victory for the Maccabees. In fact, when you read the second book of Maccabees, you will find that sometimes angelic beings were beside the Jews who were fighting against their enemies. And even the first book of Maccabees, they were faithful. They believed in God. For example, they held up the Sabbath ritual, that you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, right? But if you read First Maccabees, one of the things that the Syrians did was to take advantage of that faithfulness and uh, fight the Jews on the Sabbath, knowing that they would not resist. So the first time it happened, I think about 1,000 people died because they could not do work on the Sabbath by fighting back. And then Mattathias realized that if we don't do something about this, we're going to be eliminated. So they began to fight even on the Sabbath. The second blessing says that, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who performed miracles for our forefathers in those days at this season." Again, the miracles, the miracle of salvation against the Hellenists. These miracles are also built way back in the story of Israel. The miracle of the Red Sea, the miracle throughout the life of Israel. So there are always miracles when God shows up at the right moment. So these miracles continue to be celebrated. So that's why these blessings are given. Then the third blessing, the Thanksgiving. "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, for giving us life, for sustaining us, and for enabling us to reach this season." God sustains. Again, if you look at the history of Israel, it's a history of trauma and tribulation, displacement, and a lot of killing and death. But in the midst of it all, God sustains, God provides, God preserves. So again, that's why these blessings are given when Jews celebrate Hanukkah. Then for Christmas, we have some traditions that we follow as well. That Christmas is a holiday that is recognized around the world, symbolized by the exchange of gifts, enjoying family meals, decorating homes with trees, lights, and a lot of joy and generosity. The joy of Christmas is among us. You just have to drive around and see the celebrations that are taking place. Other adaptations that we know, of course, are Santa Claus and the stockings, and the blending of secular traditions with religious traditions. This is just part of the way traditions evolve, that over time, traditions change. Pick any tradition in the Bible and trace it, and you find that it changes. For example, communion, from the way Jesus celebrated it, with his disciples in somebody's house, reclining a table. What do we do in our churches today? No, we don't go to people's houses, right? We don't drink from one one cup. We've adapted it to suit our times. That's why you see some of these adaptations with these traditions. And then, of course, Christians are also encouraged to maintain the spiritual focus on Jesus' incarnation and the cultural adaptation of Christmas celebrations. And we should also know that in the midst of all this celebration, we should know the reason for Christmas. I don't know who came up with that expression that Jesus is the reason for the season. That is just apt to an apt reminder that we ought to recognize the importance of Christmas in the midst of celebration. Then finally, in terms of theological significance, for Hanukkah, the miracle that God preserved a people, God preserved the Jewish people, their culture, their place of worship. The temple was destroyed but rebuilt. Then the idea of human resilience and divine aid. And to this day, this is a story that is inspiring in Jewish culture, because they can look back at their history and they can see all these successes. We as people of African descent, we can also look into our history and see that God has been with us all along the way, shadowed beneath his wings. God has been with us. It shows that the God who dwells among us cannot be destroyed or defeated by the human beings that he created. The Hebrew Bible actually will say, well, God used the Assyrians and the Babylonians to punish God's people. But in the end, the Babylonians and the Assyrians are going to be punished. So human beings cannot defeat God. Even when you look at the book of Daniel, in the second last half of Daniel, chapter 7 through 12, you find that human kingdoms, they come and go. At the end of the day, it is the kingdom of God that is left standing. In Daniel chapter 7 talks about how the one like a son of man comes, and then the kingdom is given to him, and it lasts forever. So Hanukkah also highlights the theme of rededication of the temple and the endurance of faith and persecution. The Jews have it, the Christians have it. So we are in the middle of Hanukkah as our Jewish brothers and sisters are celebrating this important holiday right at this very moment. For us as Christians, God's direct personal intervention in human history through incarnation is also described in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. That is, God becomes human. He comes in human form through the birth of Jesus Christ, and that birth represents salvation, light, redemption for humanity. So Christmas emphasizes themes of hope, salvation, and God's indwelling among us, among all human beings. So again, as we celebrate next Christmas next Thursday, we should keep in mind this milestone, its importance. And finally, we can have Some of the things that we can, learn from these stories is that we are encouraged to engage in, family celebrations, whether we're celebrating Hanukkah or Christmas with meals, and also learning from each other so that we can understand each other better, so that we can have religious tolerance. We also have to deal with the commercialization of the gospel, the media. Now everything is easily accessible. But in spite of the commercialism and the idea of making money around Christmas time, let's not forget the reason for Christmas. And again, that these stories, these festivals give us an opportunity to engage in conversation, in dialogue, where again we can learn about each other. Sometimes the more we know about each other, the more we learn about each other, our history, our culture, our religion, just stories of who we are. Because after all, we are all human beings created in the image of God, as Genesis 1:26 and 27 says, that all human beings are created in the image of God. So whether we are Christians, Jews, Muslims, we are human beings. And the more we learn about our history, our culture, our traditions, the more we can understand each other and respect each other as well. Just some concluding takeaways that the two stories, Hanukkah and Christmas, both emphasize themes of light, hope, and divine presence in their celebrations. Hope emerges out of chaos. Again, the Maccabean context or the Herodian context, and then the idea that God is with God's people and God's promises continue to unfold in spite of the danger around God's people. So Hanukkah highlights Jewish resilience, divine protection, and provision to this day. The Jews are still celebrating this very week. Christmas emphasizes God's incarnation in the world and the universal good news to all humanity. And again, at the end of Matthew's gospel, go out into the world and spread the gospel to all nations. And then, of course, we see the gospel spreading through the teachings of Paul and Peter and other evangelists. So the gospel or the good news is for the entire world. So is the good news of the Christmas story. So Hanukkah and Christmas offer opportunities to foster interfaith understanding, respect, sustained community through dialogue and conversation. So when we honor these traditions, we're encouraged to embrace diversity, ensuring that the light that these stories represent continue to shine and to unite us as a human family. So hopefully we have some important takeaways, whether we celebrate as Jews, as Christians, Hanukkah and Hanukkah and Christmas. Both stories are stories of hope, success, endurance, and the light that dispels darkness.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
We appreciate you being with us to share with us concerning Hanukkah as well as Christmas, because as you said, God has called us to reach people, mankind from all walks of life. And it's good to have an understanding of various beliefs and cultural backgrounds, because he that wins souls have to be wise. And by us having an understanding of various backgrounds and beliefs, it's easier to reach other souls because they come from all walks of life. They may not just come from your corner or my corner where we live, but as God is sending out his evangelists, his missionaries, his people to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, it's important for us to have these takeaways and these understandings of different various belief systems. But we believe Jesus is the reason for the season. We are so glad that for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And we thank God that Jesus came, because if there's no Christmas without Christ. So we're so grateful for that. And I'm just going to ask you just to pray us out. Before you pray, though, I would like for you to just tell us a little bit about your book, Am I My Brother's Keeper, and how we can get that information.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Guillermo. Yes, I wrote the book, Am I My Brother's Keeper, a while ago. But basically, the subtitle is Biblical Perspectives on Poverty. I come from Africa, grew up poor, so I was always fascinated by the stories of the poor. So I came to America to investigate this subject, and it became my lifetime research. So the book goes through, one thing you learn about is that, the Bible doesn't say one thing about the poor. It says different things. It may say the poor are not supposed to be among, the poor are always with you. But again, when you read Deuteronomy 15, you say, well, the poor are not really supposed to be with you. Because if you obey the commandment and you extend to your brother or sister as they have need, then technically you could eliminate poverty. Of course, that was a struggle. So I go through, the whole Hebrew Bible area, begin with the ancient Near Eastern context, looking at traditions about, poverty and how poverty was treated. But what I found is that, the problem was never eliminated. It continued to exist even into the New Testament time. And even today in the 21st century, in spite of our development, success, technological empowerment, and all this stuff that we have. There are still poor people. Poverty has not been eliminated; it's still here. So it's an issue that needs human attention. So you can find a book on Amazon. Just put in my name, and it will come up along with other writings that I've done since then. But I want to thank you all for listening to me. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and be blessed, and let Jesus be your light, the light of the world. Thank you.
Amen. God bless you so much. And thank you, listening audience, for being with us on tonight. Have a Merry Christmas. God bless.
Thank you. Mhm. All right. All right. You take care.